Aita for defending my son, 15, after he hit his teacher? Basically, as the title says. Earlier this week, my wife and I were told to come to school immediately because our son, Adam, hit his math teacher. This was very shocking to us as we'd never had any problems with him. In fact, I'd say we'd done a great job raising him. Until now, at school, we were always praised for how well he was doing, how many friends he had, how everyone thought he was calm and nice, etc. Meanwhile, on Monday, the moment we entered school, things were strange. First, as soon as we saw Adam and wanted to talk to him, his other teacher pulled us away and immediately ordered us into the principal's office. We weren't allowed to exchange a single word. The walk down that hallway is something I don't think I'll ever forget. It was as if the walls themselves were closing in, plastered with motivational posters about respect and honesty, while every staff member we passed avoided eye contact. My wife kept looking over her shoulder, clearly wanting to catch a glimpse of Adam, but we were being shepherded too quickly, like suspects rather than parents. I remember feeling the hairs rise on the back of my neck. Something was off. We were ushered into the principal's office without ceremony. The door clicked shut behind us, and instantly the atmosphere shifted. The blinds were half drawn, sunlight slanting across stacks of paperwork on her desk. A faint smell of coffee and disinfectant lingered in the room. But what struck me most was the look on their faces. The principal, stern and unreadable, and another teacher sitting stiffly beside her. No warmth, no reassurance, just an air of judgment that settled over us like a heavy blanket. Then they immediately started telling us about the suspension, that the math teacher was at the nurse's office, and that it was unclear what other consequences would be, etc. The words were rapid, clinical, almost rehearsed. It just seemed really strange to me. No one gave us any context, any timeline of events, nothing to help us understand how Adam, the boy who never even raised his voice at home, could possibly have hit a teacher. I started asking questions. My voice was calm, but inside I could feel my pulse quickening. What happened? Why? When? The answers were vague, like they were pulling random phrases from thin air. During class, he hit the teacher. There was an injury. Each fragment only fueled my unease. I pressed harder, leaning forward, my hands flat on the desk. That doesn't answer my question. What led up to it? What did my son do? Or what was done to him? You can't expect us to just accept these half answers. They didn't want to say why or what started the whole incident. The way they shifted in their seats, glancing at each other, told me they weren't used to being challenged. That only made my suspicion grow. So I said the only thing I could think of at that moment. I wanted to see the recording of the entire incident. Classes are monitored, so there had to be footage. I wanted to see my son, hear the context, understand what really happened. And above all, I wanted to talk to Adam directly. Without those two things, I told them, I would not sign anything or get involved any further. That's when the atmosphere in the room cracked. The principal's face froze and the other teacher's lips pressed into a thin line. It was as if I had said something forbidden. They stammered through a response, trying to convince me that I had no right to demand such things, that I couldn't leave the office without first agreeing to the suspension. My wife squeezed my arm under the table, silently begging me to ease off, but I could feel a fire building inside me. I'd dealt with bureaucrats before, and I recognized the tactics. Overwhelm you with paperwork, bully you with authority, and hope you're too intimidated to push back. But this wasn't some office mistake with numbers or forms. This was my son, 15 years old, being painted as violent without a single chance to explain himself. I could see my wife's unease. She shifted in her chair, her eyes darting between me and the principal. At one point, she whispered, "Maybe we should just listen for now." But to me, that felt like surrendering before we even knew what battlefield we were on. I straightened up and asked again, sharper this time. What law says I can't see my own son right now? What rule says I have to sign away his future without even hearing his side of the story? The principal opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her confidence wavered, just for a second. The silence in that moment was louder than any shout. I realized then that they hadn't expected resistance. They thought we'd be so shocked, so ashamed, that we'd fall in line, sign the paper, nod, and leave. But that wasn't going to happen. Not while my son sat alone somewhere in this building, probably terrified, waiting to be branded a monster for something we didn't even understand yet. My wife put a hand on my shoulder, her voice quiet but tense. "Please don't make this worse." But to me, worse would have been letting them railroad us without a fight. I leaned back slightly, steadying my tone. "We'll wait. Either you show me the recording and let me speak to my son, or this conversation is over." For the first time, I saw the principal glance away. The other teacher shuffled papers nervously. And in that small crack of hesitation, I knew I'd struck the right chord. The silence that followed stretched uncomfortably. I could almost hear the tick of the clock on the wall, each second emphasizing the fact that they hadn't prepared for someone like me, a parent who wasn't willing to be bullied into submission. Finally, the principal cleared her throat and tried to regain control. "Sir, we're only trying to make sure that the school remains a safe environment for everyone," she said in that polished, bureaucratic tone that politicians use when they are trying to dodge responsibility. "It's very serious when a student attacks a teacher. You have to understand that." I felt my jaw tighten. "What I have to understand," I shot back, "is why you're refusing to give me a single concrete explanation of how this supposedly happened. You've just admitted that you have cameras in every classroom. Show me the footage. Let me hear my son's side. If it's really as simple as you claim, then the video will prove it and we can all move on." Her eyes flickered, just for a moment, and I knew I was right. There was footage. My wife, still gripping my arm, spoke softly. "Maybe we should just sign the suspension? It's only 3 weeks. He'll survive." I turned to her, shocked. 3 weeks? For what? Being startled. My voice cracked louder than I intended, but I didn't care. They're asking us to brand our son violent without even letting him speak. Don't you see how wrong that is? The teacher in the room finally chimed in, clearly uncomfortable. Look, your son, he got distracted. He was staring out the window. The math teacher decided to play a little joke, sneaking up to snap him out of it. Your son, well, he reacted badly. He lashed out, hit her, and she was injured. That's all there is to it. For a moment, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So let me get this straight, I said slowly, making sure each word carried weight. A grown adult chose to deliberately scare a 15-year-old boy in the middle of class. He panicked, acted out of reflex, and you're calling that an attack? The principal shifted uncomfortably. Intentions aside, the result was that a teacher was hurt. I leaned forward. And whose fault is that? My son's? Or the teacher who decided that humiliating and startling a kid was an acceptable teaching method? My wife whispered again. Please lower your voice. But I could see the crack in the principal's facade widening. Was there blood? Was she taken to the hospital? I demanded. The teacher looked away, muttering, she went to the nurse's office. That was it. That was the whole dramatic crisis they had been waving in front of us. A startled reaction to a bad prank. I ran a hand through my hair, trying to keep calm. My son owes her an apology. Absolutely. He will give her one. But if you think I'm going to let you suspend him for weeks over your staff's mistake, you've lost your minds. The principal stiffened. Sir, this is not how these conversations usually go. Parents typically sign whatever you put in front of them? Yeah, I figured my tone was sharp, but I was past caring. I'm not that kind of parent. I don't raise my kid to be a scapegoat for adult incompetence. There was another silence. Finally, the principal gave a small sigh, as if conceding a battle she hadn't realized she'd been fighting. You can see your son now. When Adam walked into the room, I felt both relief and fury. Relief that he was okay, pale, shaken, but unharmed, and fury that they had kept him isolated like some criminal for hours. He froze when he saw me, his eyes wide and searching. And in that moment, I knew exactly why I was fighting so hard. Dad, he whispered. It's okay, I said firmly. Tell me what happened, in your own words. He swallowed hard, his voice trembling. I was just looking outside. The lesson was boring. I wasn't really paying attention. Then suddenly she was right next to me, yelling, boo, or something like that. I freaked out. I thought someone was attacking me. I screamed and my arm just reacted. I didn't even realize I hit her until she was holding her face. My wife covered her mouth with her hand, eyes wide. The teacher shifted uncomfortably again. I turned back to the principal. There you have it, straight from the source. Reflex, no intent. You can't punish a kid for being startled. The principal opened her mouth, but I cut her off. Unless, of course, what you're really afraid of is admitting that your staff crossed a line, that this whole incident happened because a teacher behaved unprofessionally. Maybe you'd rather bury that detail and pretend my son is the problem, because it's easier than holding an adult accountable. The color drained slightly from her face, and I knew I'd hit the mark. Adam looked terrified through the whole exchange, and I forced myself to calm down for his sake. I put a hand on his shoulder. You'll apologize to her, Adam. That's the right thing to do. But don't you dare think this makes you a bad person. You were scared. You reacted. That's human. He nodded weakly, eyes wet. My wife, though still uneasy, finally leaned back in her chair. She didn't say it, but I think she was starting to realize this wasn't the black and white case the school had tried to make it out to be. The principal cleared her throat again. We still don't know what consequences the teacher will request. I almost laughed. Consequences? She should be apologizing to him. At that, the meeting dissolved. They let us leave, though I could feel their resentment thick in the air. The walk out of that building felt lighter, but also heavier, because I knew this wasn't over. They had tried to paint my son as violent. They had tried to strong-arm me into signing away his rights. And worst of all, they had shown me just how fragile the trust between parents and schools really is. It was Friday when I realized just how long a single week can feel. Every morning as I walked past Adam's room before heading to work, I'd see him sitting on his bed, already dressed for school, backpack at his feet, but with that clouded look in his eyes. He wasn't the same boy from just a week earlier. The boy who joked over breakfast, who argued playfully with his younger sister about the last piece of toast. Now he was quiet, careful, like he was waiting for something bad to happen. At school, things were no better. Adam told us the students whispered about it in the halls. Some kids exaggerated the story. He punched her so hard she had to go to the hospital. Others joked about it like it was a video game. Dude, you KO'd a teacher. That's epic. But underneath the laughter was suspicion. And kids, cruel as they can be at that age, started testing him, sneaking up behind him, clapping loudly near his ear, waiting to see if he'd freak out again. Adam hated it. He said it made him feel like an animal on display. My wife and I tried to reassure him, but even between ourselves, we couldn't agree. She thought I had made the situation worse by refusing to sign the suspension. 3 weeks would have been a reset, she said. He'd come back, the drama would die down. But I couldn't shake the image of that office, of the way they tried to corner us. If I had signed, Adam's record would forever say he'd been suspended for assaulting a teacher. No one would care about the nuance, about him being startled. Colleges don't read between the lines. Employers don't ask follow-up questions. They'd see suspended for violence, and that would be that. So, yes, maybe I was stubborn, but I was stubborn for him. By Wednesday, word spread that the math teacher hadn't returned to school. She was on leave, according to the administration. Nobody knew for how long. Some said she was embarrassed. Others claimed she was pursuing charges. The truth was buried somewhere between those rumors, and the silence from the school only made things worse. One evening, Adam came home pale and anxious. He said one of his classmates had overheard a teacher whispering that legal action might be considered. The words hit my wife like a thunderclap. She paced the kitchen, wringing her hands. Legal action? Against our son? He's 15. I poured a glass of water and forced her to sit. Rumors. Don't panic until we know. But even as I said it, I felt the unease gnawing in my chest. If the teacher decided to push the issue, if she filed a police report, things could spiral beyond the school's control. That night, long after everyone went to bed, I sat at the dining table scrolling through laws and precedents on my laptop. Words like minor, assault, intent blurred on the screen. I read case after case where context was ignored, where self-defense or reflex didn't matter as much as the headline, student attacks teacher. It kept me awake until the early hours. On Thursday, I received a call from another parent, someone I vaguely knew from PTA meetings. She lowered her voice like she was sharing a secret. I heard what happened with Adam. Don't let them scare you. That teacher's been reported before. Not for violence, but for, let's say, questionable behavior with kids. My daughter said she humiliated her once, in front of the whole class, calling her stupid for getting a problem wrong. I gripped the phone tighter. Why hasn't anyone said anything? She sighed. Because it's easier not to. Parents don't want their kids targeted. But maybe now, she let the thought hang. That conversation fueled me. It meant Adam wasn't the only one. And maybe this incident wasn't as isolated as they wanted us to believe. Still, the silence from the school stretched on. Every day Adam went to class. Every day he waited for the other shoe to drop. His friends didn't know whether to defend him or distance themselves. Teachers gave him cautious looks. And through it all, the math teacher's chair sat empty. Friday afternoon, as the final bell rang, Adam trudged home slower than usual. He dropped his bag by the door and muttered, "They made me sit in the office again." My chest tightened. "Why?" He shrugged, staring at the floor. "They said it was precautionary, like I might snap." I just sat there for an hour, doing nothing. That was the moment my anger burned hotter than ever. They weren't just punishing him with paperwork. They were punishing him with suspicion, treating him like a ticking bomb instead of a boy who'd been startled by a cruel joke. I looked at my wife, and for once, she didn't argue. Her face was pale, her lips pressed into a thin line. She finally whispered what I'd been thinking all along. They want us to give in, to sign, to make it easy for them. But now it wasn't just about easy. It was about justice. And I wasn't going to stop until the truth was clear. By the weekend, I realized I had two choices. Wait for the school to tighten the noose around Adam, or move first. Waiting had never been my style. Saturday morning, I sat down with a notepad and wrote everything we knew so far. Dates, conversations, exact words that had been said in that office. I listed witnesses, from Adam's classmates to the parent who'd called me. I wasn't going to rely on memory. If this became a fight, I'd come prepared with facts. My wife hovered nearby, arms folded. She still looked torn, caught between wanting peace and knowing that silence wasn't protecting Adam anymore. "You're really going to push this?" she asked quietly. "Yes," I said without hesitation. "If we let them label him violent now, what's next? Every time he raises his voice, they'll say he's dangerous. Every time he makes a mistake, they'll point back to this moment. I'm not letting them build that kind of file on him." She didn't argue. And her silence for the first time felt like support rather than doubt. On Sunday, I started calling other parents. Carefully, casually, just enough to gauge reactions. Some brushed it off. Kids are kids. Maybe Adam just lost control. But others hesitated. One mother admitted her daughter had complained about that same math teacher, sneaking up behind students, tapping them hard on the shoulder, even shouting to wake them up. Another parent said his son had nightmares for weeks after she slammed a textbook next to his head. Patterns. That's what I was finding. A pattern of behavior that nobody had dared challenge until now. Monday morning, I walked Adam to school myself. Not because he needed me to. He was embarrassed, in fact, but because I wanted to see the faces of the staff when I arrived. The principal spotted me in the hallway, her smile brittle. "We're still reviewing the incident," she said quickly, as though rehearsed. I nodded slowly. "And I'm still waiting for that footage." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "That's confidential." "Not when it involves my son," I countered. "Not when you're threatening his future with suspension and maybe worse. You show me the video or I'll file an open records request." "You know I can." She blinked, caught off guard, then turned on her heel and muttered something about checking with legal. That afternoon, Adam told me the whispers were spreading faster. Some kids were convinced he was going to be expelled. Others said the teacher's family wanted to press charges. His hands shook when he spoke, and it cut me deeper than anything. He wasn't just fighting rumors. He was fighting the fear of being abandoned by the very system that was supposed to protect him. That night, I sat at the dining table again, drafting a formal letter. I wrote to the school board, the superintendent, even CC'd a local journalist whose articles I'd read about student rights. I outlined the facts as calmly as possible. A teacher deliberately startled a minor, the student reacted out of fear, and now the administration was attempting to punish him without transparency. I ended it with one sentence that I hoped would cut through the noise. If you suspend my son without releasing the full context of this incident, you are teaching every student in this district that truth and fairness do not matter. I sent the emails before I could second guess myself. The next day, I noticed a shift. Teachers who normally avoided me in the halls now glanced my way, some even nodding slightly, as if to say they knew more than they could admit. One slipped me a folded note after class. "You're not the only parent. Keep pushing." Meanwhile, Adam said things felt both worse and better. Worse because the stares continued, better because some classmates began quietly defending him. "It was just a reflex," one kid told another loudly in the cafeteria. "You'd have done the same. Small victories, but victories all the same." By Wednesday, I received a curt email from the principal. "We have received your request. The matter is under review. Please refrain from further escalation until the investigation concludes." The translation: they were scrambling. My wife read the email and sighed. "Do you think they'll actually show us the video?" I leaned back in my chair. "They'll have to. Because if they don't, it's not just us anymore. Other parents are watching. The board is watching. Even the press might start watching." The house was quiet after that. Too quiet. Adam did his homework in silence, earbuds in. My wife scrolled her phone endlessly. I sat staring at the email, wondering how far they were willing to go and how far I was willing to push back. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just about Adam anymore. It was about every student who'd ever been silenced, every parent who'd ever been strong-armed into compliance. And I wasn't backing down. By the end of that week, I knew the walls of the school could no longer contain this story. The email I'd sent had traveled further than I'd expected. Monday morning, I received a polite but formal response from the superintendent's office. "We acknowledge receipt of your letter. Please be assured that this incident is under review by the district. We will contact you regarding next steps." The phrasing was sterile, but the fact that they even responded meant one thing. The principal had been forced to escalate. At lunch, I sat in my car outside the office building, rereading the message. The thought that people beyond those four walls were finally paying attention gave me a strange mixture of relief and dread. Relief because Adam's fate wasn't being decided in a locked office with blinds half closed. Dread because once bureaucracy was involved, outcomes became unpredictable. When Adam came home that day, I could tell he felt the shift too. "Dad," he said cautiously, "one of the teachers told me the principal looked really stressed in the staff meeting. Like, she kept saying the word liability." Liability. The word made me smile grimly. Finally, they were speaking a language that could shake them out of their arrogance. That evening, the phone rang. It was the same parent who'd called me before, the one whose daughter had been humiliated. She sounded more animated this time. I talked to two other families. Their kids had issues with that teacher too. They're willing to talk, but only if someone else goes first. They're scared of backlash. I promised her I'd stand with them. If they're ready to speak, I'll go to the meeting with them myself. The meeting came sooner than expected. Wednesday, the district arranged a conference call. The principal, the superintendent, the math department chair, and, surprisingly, the teacher herself were all present. My wife sat next to me at the kitchen table, her hands folded tightly, Adam in the next room listening in silence. The call began with formalities. Then the superintendent asked the teacher to give her account. Her voice trembled slightly. I was trying to engage Adam. He seemed distracted. I thought if I startled him lightly, it would bring his focus back. I never imagined he'd react violently. I gripped the edge of the table. Violently. The word stung. "Violently?" I said, interrupting. "He screamed and flailed. He didn't plan it. He didn't threaten you." He was startled. "That's not violence, that's reflex." There was silence on the line. The superintendent cleared his throat. "We will review the classroom footage to establish intent." That's when I pounced. "So the footage does exist. Good. I expect a copy by the end of the week." The principal muttered something about confidentiality, but the superintendent overrode her. "We'll consult legal on what can be released." For the first time, I felt momentum shift. After the call, Adam emerged from his room, pale but hopeful. "Did they believe you?" he asked. I put my arm around him. "They don't have to believe me. They just have to see the truth. And the truth is on that video." But the real twist came 2 days later. On Friday morning, the same parent called me again, her voice practically buzzing through the phone. "You won't believe this. The teacher hasn't just been on leave. She's under internal review. Some staff complained about her methods, said she's been too aggressive with kids for years. Apparently, this isn't her first time being questioned." I felt my breath catch. Everything was falling into place. What happened with Adam wasn't an isolated mistake. It was the crack that revealed the whole structure beneath. That evening, I sat with my wife and Adam at the dinner table. My wife looked at me differently than before. No more doubt in her eyes. Instead, there was quiet resolve. "You were right," she said softly. "If we just signed those papers, none of this would have come out." Adam looked between us, still nervous but slightly lighter, like a weight had shifted off his shoulders. "Does this mean I'm safe?" he asked. I didn't want to lie. "It means you're safer than you were a week ago, but we're not finished. We'll keep pushing until your name is cleared completely." And as I said it, I realized this was no longer just about defending Adam from suspension. It was about exposing a system that tried to cover its own mistakes at the expense of a child. The fight was far from over, but for the first time, it felt like we weren't fighting alone. The following week felt like waiting for a storm you knew was already on the radar. Every phone call made my stomach clench. Every email notification set my pulse racing. Finally, on Wednesday, the superintendent's office called. "We are prepared to review the classroom footage with you present. Please come to the district building tomorrow at 10 a.m. I barely slept that night. When we arrived, the room was sterile. White walls, a long table, a monitor in the corner. The superintendent sat at the head, flanked by the principal, the district's legal counsel, and a couple of other administrators. My wife sat rigid beside me, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles turned white. Adam wasn't allowed in the room, but I could feel his presence just outside the door, waiting. The superintendent cleared his throat. "We will play the relevant portion of the footage. Please remain quiet until it is finished." The screen flickered, and there it was. Adam's classroom, rows of desks, students scribbling notes. Adam sat near the window, chin propped on his hand, eyes drifting outside. Nothing unusual, just a boy daydreaming in math class. Then it happened. The teacher crept across the room, exaggeratedly tiptoeing behind him. She leaned close, raised her hands like claws, and shouted something, muffled on the recording but clearly meant to startle. Adam's reaction was instant. He jerked, screamed, flailed his arm back in panic. His hand caught her square across the face. She staggered back, clutching her cheek, her expression more shock than pain. The room erupted in laughter, some kids gasping, others pointing. Adam froze, horrified, while she turned and stormed out. And that was it. The video ended. Silence filled the room. I leaned forward slowly. "That's your evidence of violence?" I asked, my voice low but steady. "A child being startled by an adult's prank?" The legal counsel cleared his throat awkwardly. "It does appear to be a reflexive action." The principal's face flushed crimson. She opened her mouth to argue, but the superintendent raised a hand. "I think we've seen enough." For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt the weight shift entirely. My wife exhaled shakily. She squeezed my hand under the table, not out of fear this time, but in quiet triumph. The superintendent folded his hands. "Based on the evidence, we do not see grounds for suspension. We will, however, require Adam to provide a written apology for the incident as a matter of respect and closure." "That's fair," I said immediately. "And the teacher?" He hesitated. "Her methods are under review. Until that review concludes, she will remain on administrative leave translation. Her career in this district was likely over." When we left the building, Adam was waiting in the hallway, his face pale with nerves. I knelt in front of him, put both hands on his shoulders. "It's over, son. You're not suspended." His eyes widened, then filled with tears. He didn't speak, just hugged me fiercely, clinging like he hadn't since he was small. That night, as we sat around the dinner table, the atmosphere felt lighter than it had in weeks. My wife served pasta. Adam cracked a small joke about how he'd have to write the most polite apology letter in history, and even his sister giggled. But beneath the laughter, I felt something else. Vindication. We hadn't just defended Adam. We had exposed a system that tried to bury the truth. If I'd signed those papers in that office on day one, this footage would have never seen the light of day. My son would be branded violent, and the teacher would still be creeping up on children, using fear as a teaching tactic. Now things were different. Other parents had already begun whispering. Some thanked me quietly in the parking lot. One even said, "You gave us the courage to speak up." Adam still has scars, not physical, but emotional. He's more cautious now, more guarded. But he also knows that when the world tried to turn against him, his father stood firm. And maybe that's the lesson he'll carry longest. As for me, I learned something too. Sometimes doing the right thing isn't about calming the waters. Sometimes it's about stirring them up until the truth floats to the surface. And when I look at Adam now, sitting straighter, smiling a little more, I know I'd fight the same fight 1,000 times over.